All right, kind of continuing with a theme here for the past couple interviews, interviewing writers from Ahoy Comics. I've already talked to Tom Pierre, Mark Russell, and now I'll be talking to Mariah McCourt, who wrote the Ash and Thorn miniseries. Um, so let me just bring her in, and we'll find out about not only about her as a writer, but a little bit about the book, which is coming out soon as a trade. Hi, how's it going?
It's good. How are you?
Hanging in there, hanging in there. So, before we get started talking about Ash and Thorn, which I read the first couple issues when it came out, and then it kind of got lost in the pile, and I just finished it today, so it's
Oh,
fresh.
good. That's okay.
But um, before we talking about that, do you remember the first comic book that you read, or maybe the one that kind of got you interested in the medium?
I sure do. Death, the High Cost of Living. Neil Gaiman's sort of short spin-off mini from The Sandman was really the first one that I remember connecting in a really profound way and letting me know that I could do something with comics that was different than what I had been seeing. My brother collected a lot of superhero stuff. He didn't really read them, but he collected them, and I liked them, but I didn't like get into them. And then I read that. I just picked it up at my local comic shop, and that was when I really the mix of sort of horror, but there's a lot of joy in that story as well. Those things together, I think, were really what sort of sparked my interest. And then specifically, the Vertigo comics were the things that I sort of gravitated towards after that.
Were there any Vertigo comics in particular, other than the Sandman?
A lot of Vertigo books that I sort of picked up. I picked up a lot of them, like the minis and things like that, before I started working there. So I was reading Lucifer and some of that kind of stuff. Libby, do you think you could maybe not crinkle things while I'm doing this? Sorry.
It's okay.
There we go. That's just parenthood during the pandemic. So it was a lot of that kind of stuff. I picked up in
Trust me, I know.
yeah. You know what? It's been nice. Everybody is in the same boat, sort of thing. Like I've been parenting from home, quite a while, but now everybody else is too. So now people are like, I get it. It's cool. Yeah. So for me, that was sort of the instigator for that kind of work, and I ended up working on Lucifer, which was sort of a big surprise there after I interned at Vertigo and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I just sort of got into weirder comics. I got into a lot of at the time it's the SLG comics, so like Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, Lenore, that kind of stuff. I was one of those little gothy, angsty teenagers. So that was the kind of stuff that interested me from the beginning.
And it sounds like from what you just said that you did an intern at Vertigo. Is that how you kind of got started in the industry?
It is. I went to SVA in New York, School of Visual Arts, and I have a degree in illustration. That's my original background. And during my junior year, I went to the intern office to see what kind of stuff they had that was available. And it turned out that DC sort of in general, but Vertigo specifically, then that was where I wanted to work. And they asked me to. They're like, well, what about regular DC? And I was like, yeah, that's not really my thing. And I guess nobody else had applied that year for Vertigo. And so, yeah, I went and I interviewed with Karen actually right away, Karen Berger, which was like, and yeah, started interning. And I interned for a whole year and got to know, everybody in a lot of the different books and things. And then after that, I finished up my senior year and then got hired as an assistant editor not long after graduating, actually. So yeah, that was my introduction to all of it. It's weird and unusual, and I don't think the way most people get into this stuff. So,
and what besides I guess your love for the medium made you want to kind of make the move from being an editor to writing?
It's funny. I hadn't really considered it. Actually, I kept those things very, very separate until I was at IDW, and IDW already had a number of editors sort of would sometimes work on things depending on their affinity for like a particular license and things.
Mhm.
And I was asked, Livy,
It's
sorry,
okay. It's
she's
okay.
just like she knows I'm talking, so she's like, I'm gonna do every little thing here. Um, so basically, they had a lot of different editors working on different titles, and Chris Ryle asked me if I wanted to help on Angel initially because I was working with the trade paperbacks at first when I worked there.
Hmm.
And since I did know the show and Buffy and all those kinds of things, I jumped at that. And then the True Blood license became a thing that they were trying to land. And
Hmm.
I had watched the show and everything. And again, Ryle asked me if I wanted to put together a pitch for it, and that's how we got the license. And so after that, they were like, "Do you want to try co-writing?" And I was like, "Sure." Um, yeah, I kind of just like jumped into it, and it worked out. So that was pretty much how that happened. But I still actually keep those things very separate, the editing and writing, because
Sure.
the worst thing for an editor to do is when you're working with creators is to do any sort of like, well, if I was writing this, you cannot do that kind of thing.
Right.
You have to really let them do what they need to do. So I still keep those things very compartmentalized, even though they have similar skill sets and things. They require different things from you. So I try to keep those things very, very clearly delineated.
Mhm. And how did you kind of end up, having your one of your works published through Ahoy Comics?
Well, so in the years between IDW and stuff, I started writing. I did Emily and the Strangers for Dark Horse. I worked with Paper Cuts on their Charms line, and I did Stitched, which is like a middle grade-ish series,
Hmm.
Spooky Kids. And I had actually gotten to know Stuart more independently. We weren't at Vertigo at the same time. But yeah, through like conventions and Peter Gross, who I worked with on Lucifer. And he read Stitched and he just emailed me and was like, hey, Ahoy is sort of funny Vertigo. It's got this particular kind of vibe, and Stitched has this dialogue that I really think is a lot of fun. Do you have any ideas that might, fit into this? And I did. I had just been bouncing around the Ash and Thorn idea myself, as I had been wanting to for a while to tell a story about older characters, but I wasn't sure
Hmm.
how I wanted to do that. So when they were like, "Oh, funny Vertigo," I went, "Oh, well, this concept might." I'm like, "It's not ha ha funny. Like, it's not just like a comedy piece." I'm like, "But
Right.
it's weird, and there is a lot of humor inherent in the situation." And stuff that
Right.
comes out because I like the blend of horror and humor,
Right.
and they went yes like right away. So it happened really fast. They just like they loved the concept and were like, yes, let's do it, and it all got put together. So it's
And
yeah.
so, yeah, can you kind of give a brief overview of what Ash and Thorn is about, and maybe besides, I know you said you wanted to write a story with older characters, but
Mhm.
kind of what kind of popped that kind of story into your mind?
Well, for me, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, which has a lot of different like sitcoms and TV and stuff, and also long form narratives and things. But I actually grew up with my grandparents around all the time. So I was really lucky. I had both my grandmothers growing up. So older women, like truly older, like in their 70s and 80s, was a big part of my life growing up. And I realized in comics, at least, just don't really see those characters very often as main characters, as the point of view. And that was something I
Hmm.
kept noticing again and again. And I guess in my 20s and stuff is when I really got into Buffy. I was a little bit of a late bloomer, I guess, into some of that stuff. But the deliberate
Yeah.
playing of tropes and things in Buffy, where it's very obvious and not shying away from that stuff, but subverting them and doing different things, appealed to me. So I think what happened for me, at least with Ash and Thorn, was that I was thinking about the older characters and thinking about how did I want to do that and how did I want to reach the kind of audience, the kind of readers I already really like, which is people into weird and horror and sort of strange stuff. And I thought, well, if you sort of smush these things together, and you're not being coy about it. You're being very obvious and um, deliberate. I think
Hmm.
that was really what made Ash and Thorn sort of come out. So the concept there is really we say Golden Girls meets Buffy, but that is really the shorthand, the easy sort of tag for it, because that really is the basic genesis of both of those things. Like Golden Girls was something I watched a lot as a kid, and even though, funnily enough, years later, we find out that the actresses weren't really that old. Playing those parts, but like for TV, I guess at the time they were. So it was the sort of like they're retired. You're like, are they? Because they're not. They weren't really that old. But I wanted to. There's a reason why Lottie is 80, and Peruvia is something couple hundred years old. Because I wanted them to be truly older, not just like 40, which I'm 41, but that's not really truly older. And I wanted it to be, where you really are dealing with what it's like to be an aging person with this sudden expectation of saving the world, and what that would be like, what you would bring to it, what you might or might not be too thrilled about with that scenario. And then also just letting it get really strange and weird with the monsters and the rest of it.
Well, I'm glad you said 41 wasn't that old, because I'm 42.
See, it's not. We think of it that way because so many things in pop culture are geared towards younger audiences, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think younger audiences would like to see older characters too. Because I was talking to someone about Ash and Thorn the other day, and they said, a lot of it reads, even though the characters are older, has a lot of young adult themes and has a lot of that kind of vibe to it. And I was like, yeah, that's not an accident, because I wanted it to be able to be read by a lot of different people from a lot of different perspectives, who enjoy comics, maybe haven't picked them up, and who are looking for something maybe a little bit different, and that are familiar with exactly those things we referenced, like Golden Girls and Buffy, and being like, well, how would you combine those? I did think about that a lot when I was putting it together.
So the two main characters are I'm sorry, I'm gonna how did you come up? I thought the bad guy, the evil monster thing was pretty cool. I mean, that just looks like a bad acid trip.
Yeah, he does. Well, so I wasn't. He's basically the embodiment of all the things that I personally find most troubling in a person. With also the added caveat that he is an actual cosmic monster, and he does really want to just like eat everything. So he's also doesn't really have any redeeming qualities. I actually kind of wanted to get away from that, like, oh, bad guy who has like a soul. I'm like, nope, this guy's just awful. Like, he's just really, really terrible. And how you would deal with that, because there's a lot of scary things going on in the world right now, and to me, something that just wants to consume, that just wants to power, that just wants to be everything and is just never really satisfied is really scary. And that was kind of the quality that in him, at least, I was kind of going for most. And the Lovecraftian monster thing is because I find those things really creepy, and also just the mouths and the eyes, and something that's not human but has some things that they're a little familiar, that people, at least with especially the horror genre, are going to recognize some of that stuff. But Sue's really the one who designed him and just like nailed it straight off with that bizarre many tentacled head reveal thing. She really went for it, and he just gets weirder and creepier as the series goes on. So it was really great to see that, because she got that from the scripts, and like I did give some character stuff, but I also said, like, if you've got an idea, just like go ahead, run with it. He's supposed to be creepy, so don't feel like you got to hold back. If you want to make him really gross and weird, feel free. And she did.
So let's talk a bit about your partner, Sue.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get connected with her? Had you worked with her before?
No. I think I had seen some of her work, but no, I hadn't worked with her. And she was totally a suggestion from Sarah Litt when we were talking about different artists and different styles and things for the series. We wanted somebody who had the horror element, but that could also be playful and have a fun time with this kind of thing. And that's not an easy thing necessarily, because sometimes people are one or the other, but they're not necessarily both. But Sue, like, immediately, like, she knew exactly how to do the characters and get that that sort of feel for it right away. Like this creepy image here. Those are things that she started drawing right away, and you know, Lottie and stuff were defined by just that was a lot of discussion about what the character was like as a person. How Lottie and Peruvia were sort of designed, and there were certain qualities that I wanted. There are definitely some things that I called on for, like Peruvia, like the cardigans and the brooches was something one of my grandmothers was very much into fashion wise. And Lottie has a lot with an art teacher that I had growing up, and that was partly what inspired sort of the idea of her being a retired art teacher and coming from a kind of different background that I think you often see for characters like this, where it's usually like, because it usually is teenagers, they don't really have a lot of background. They're just an angsty teenager. Whereas Lottie is an 80-year-old who has been around and done a lot and has a very different set of life experiences. And then we get to see Sarah, who is a teenage character,
Yeah.
who is kind of what you would, more along the lines of what you expect for a chosen one, and being put in a very different position and trying to figure out how she can, or what she even wants to do. Does she want to even get involved in any of this? So that's where a lot of that stuff came from. I'm so glad we have this beautiful musical soundtrack from my child.
It's okay. It's perfectly fine. So, how did was it the what's the way with the rest of the creative team, like the colorist? Is that did you just
Yeah,
kind of?
that's all Sarah. Sarah Lit, the editor, you know, she brought in Pippa, who has done a great job with Sue's work, and you know, color can really make or break a book. Jill Thompson, I have worked with before several times, and is a friend of mine. And we just sort of sent her this to, like, hey, you know, would you be interested in doing doing covers for this? And she went, yes, which was great because if there's anybody you could just go, here's the scripts. What do you feel like doing for a cover? That's pretty much.
Oh yeah, I love her work too.
I mean, you don't get better than that, and you can just trust her to do what she does best. So I think that was sort of one of the really nice things, is that there's just a lot of trust involved in this team up. So, you know, we knew what people were going to be able to do and bring to it, and they did. And it was all really easy, you know, getting pencils and stuff, like maybe a note here or two about some little detail or something, but nothing, no big things like that. They just kind of flowed.
So I know that Ahoy is, you know, famous for their, you know, extra content. I know that you know, in the Ash and Thorn, you had some recipes which, you know, later show up in the, you know, in the later issues. Those recipes that, you know, you you know come up with, or ones that, you know, you just kind of found and adapted to, you know, to this, you know, so you could use in or.
Well, it's
I felt
funny.
like eating after.
Well, yeah, so it's funny. So the recipes thing we could come up with before, like, pandemic stuff started, as sort of fun little extras, because that Ahoy does do them, and because baking and sort of home art stuff was a big part of the background sort of stuff in the series. There's a lot of the world building stuff is there for all of that stuff. You're right there, kiddo. Yeah. Okay. Sounds drastic. But baking stuff, something I do a lot actually with my daughter. So they're all real recipes, and they're all ones that I've either family ones that I've sort of futzed around with, and things that I've just kind of come up with. And as is probably pretty apparent in most of the recipes at this point, I like ginger, so that's kind of been a recurring theme. But yeah, like it was a lot of that was just sort of the pie stuff. Like, I just thought unusual things to pair together, since I was getting to do this sort of fun stuff, you know, with Ahoy so much anyway, was sort of finding different and weird things to pair up with horror stuff. So, like, baking, I don't think most people think of that, even though you do have like some of that in fairy tales, like the Hansel and Gretel stuff's pretty creepy. But yeah, and I think that also kind of does go weirdly with the theme of, like, Court's all about devouring things without thought and just sort of gluttony, whereas, like, Lottie's about creativity and making things for others and sharing and things. So that aspect is there sort of in the background.
Now, you know, it was a 5-issue series, and it wrapped up fairly really nice. And do you have more Ash and Thorn stories that you would like to tell if
Oh yeah.
if Ahoy asked you to?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 There's a big world, and there's a lot more
Hmm.
for the characters. But it's important to me in anything that I work on that while there be room and an obvious room for more stories in an ending, it not be like an unsatisfying cliffhanger. I
Hmm.
know that that's something a lot of things do these days, because cliffhangers are like, I gotta pick up the next thing. But I think you can also end up with the opposite problem, which is something not getting what it should and leaving readers sort of
Hmm.
feeling crummy about it. Like I just saw the Glow news today, and I was like, oh, because that's very much a cliffhangery ending right now. So not
Oh,
getting
I missed it. You can.
yeah, it's not getting it was renewed, but now it's been canceled. So
Ah.
it's like we won't get the last season, and that really stinks. So I try not to do things like that in my stories. So again, like there's closure for that particular story, but there's still plenty for the characters and world and things to do. So and I always plan those
Hmm.
things out kind of beforehand. So I have that stuff kind of all worked out in at least general sense. So I always know where I'm heading with something, so that should we get to tell more stories, which I hope we do. There's callbacks to things in season one, and there's consequences and things that keep going. So yeah, that's always sort of there. But yeah, it's definitely something I wrote with the idea that there's room for more.
Hmm. So I know you've done some stuff with like IDWs. You said, where are there any other like characters in like DC or Marvel that you would you have a story that you would like to tell?
I mean, not really superheroes. Like I like the fact that they're doing sort of the middle grade and YA stuff. Like I joked about this on
Hmm.
Twitter recently, where I was like, I really can only see myself with that kind of stuff doing like a Lois Lane mystery series or something, like where she where she has to like team up with someone and like with like Aunt May, not Aunt May. That's two different things. I'm tired.
It's all right.
But anyway, like a Lois Lane, DC sort of team up with someone else. Like I like a lot of pairing up of older characters with younger characters.
Hmm.
So pairing people up together and doing that kind of thing. But that's really all I can think of. I've thought about it a lot, because I certainly have enjoyed like the Marvel movies and things. Um, but no stories really come to mind. I guess when it comes to this kind of stuff, I definitely prefer my own stuff or a kind of more unusual IPs. Like there's Stranger Things is probably more my
Hmm.
wheelhouse than something like DC or Marvel.
Hmm. I completely understand. Um, so why don't you, uh, as we wrap things up, stuff are you currently reading anything? It can be comic book, it can be you know, novel, anything you would recommend to people.
Sure. Well, I'm obsessed with Lore Olympus on Webtoons, like some kind of crazy person. I absolutely love that webcomic. It's beautiful. The story is like, phew, it's like the exception to the cliffhanger rule because like every episode is a cliffhanger ending, and you're just like tense about it. So I really love that. I'm actually I'm researching some Victorian history at the moment. So I've been reading a book, The Victorian Ladies Guide, which is all sorts of fashion and beauty and but also social mores and things of the Victorian era, which is actually really
Hmm.
fascinating. And I'm that and botany. I just read a botanical book from the 1700s that gets the
Okay.
first sort of known one of, and it's an amazing amount of plants for let's say bathroom issues. We'll put it that way. Every other plant is meant
Yeah.
to address something to do with a bathroom complaint. So I was like, huh. But anyway, so I'm at the moment I'm doing a lot of research into certain stuff. So that's been a lot of my books actually.
No, no, that's perfectly, not good,
Yeah, it's not as
So,
exciting as some other things, but I have a couple of recommendations. I've read quite a lot of books this year. I was going through my list and I've read 87 books. So I was like,
wow.
huh, um, that's a lot. Which is it's not a bad thing or anything. Most of them have been comfort reads, I would say. They've been mostly like historical romances and some other stuff. But yeah, I've just kind of been enjoying doing some completely not comics related research stuff for some other stories.
Okay. So, as we wrap things up here, you want to kind of have a pitch for the trade, which
Sure.
I think it's a month that it comes out, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then where can people follow you on social media if you're on social media?
I am way too much. I am Tired Fairy on Twitter, and Monster Tea Time on Instagram, and Patreon. I never pronounced that correctly. Uh, where I do writing and art and things like that because I have that background too. And really, the pitch for Ash and Thorn is it's Golden Girls meets Buffy, and in the trade, you're gonna get a whole lot of recipes, and some new ones, and some good kind of fun back end goodies, along with the whole story about an 80-year-old trying to fix the world.
No? Well, sounds good, and I think everybody should check it out. And I hope
Thank you.
soon. All right. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time this evening to talk with us. And if you ever have anything else that you would like to talk about, you're more than welcome to come on. And
Thank
you
you.
know, the best of luck. Whatever the stuff you're working on, and
Thank you very
hope to
much.
hear and see
Oh
stuff
yeah,
from you coming soon.
there's one thing. There's a project I would like to plug. It's not mine, like exclusively, but it's Insider Art. That's a
Okay.
book put together with it's an anthology with 200 plus pages and creators and stuff to benefit retailers during all of this. So that could be, you can find it on the digital copies on Gumroad, and it's enormous and it's beautiful.
All right. Definitely have to check that out.
Thank you.
All right. Well, again, thank you for taking the time this evening, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Oh, Libby. Okay. Thank you. I'll be able to make sure she's okay.
and
Thank you.
maybe if they ever start having them again, maybe I'll see you
Conventions.
at a con or something.
Yeah, that would be lovely. Thank you for this. This was fun.
All right. Well, have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Night.
Oh, that's a big tub.